Hi, everybody. This is Craig with Out on Film, and welcome to Out on Film Conversations. And I'm delighted today to have the director and some of the cast from Dramarama. And I'm going to introduce Atlanta's own Paul Conroy with Outfront Theater, which is Atlanta's only exclusive LGBTQIA plus theater company. So, Paul, I am going to turn this over to you to host this conversation.
Thank you, Craig. And thanks to the three of you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for moderating. This is a perfect fit for our film.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to ask all of you, everyone should have seen this film. I absolutely loved it. When each of you play Clue, which character are you? Because you have to pick one of the characters to be, and everyone always picks the same character. I think it says a lot about your personality. So which character are you whenever you play Clue?
That's so funny.
For you mean for each three of us, or
yeah, who do you pick?
I'm usually Professor Plum.
Really?
Okay. Yeah.
Well, Professor.
Right, that makes sense. I go with the maid.
I think I'm just always like whoever nobody else wants. It's like kind of how I am in Monopoly. I'm like I let everybody else take their pick, and then whoever is left.
They're like,
I'm so good at Clue.
Have the shoe.
Hmm?
The Monopoly.
Oh, in Monopoly. Yes. I was like,
Someone always wants to be the race car or something really cool. So I guess, Nick was just like, well, I'll be the thimble. That's totally fine.
I'll literally, yeah. I'm going to win regardless. So,
this movie dropped.
You, Paul? You have to answer the question.
Oh, I have to answer the question. I'm always Colonel Mustard because first of all, because I'm like, well, he's like the highest ranking, but it's like Miss Scarlet always goes first, and so Colonel Mustard always goes second because you go in a certain order. So I'm like, well, I don't want to go first, but I'll go second.
Nice.
So I don't know. I feel like there should be some sort of BuzzFeed quiz that tells you like your personality based on that.
True.
So, Jonathan, this movie, the beginning of it, the structure of the murder mystery party, I read that this is a true story, that this actually happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's fact and fiction mixed up together, but I mean, it's based off of the characters are all based off of me and my friends, and who we were at the time. That's all definitely very true. The events of the evening is where more of the fiction comes in. But the details in the film in terms of what these characters are, consuming at the time and what they are interested in, what their hopes and dreams are, a lot of that is based in reality.
Okay. So Nico and Nick, were you theater kids in high school as well?
I grew up a competition dancer. And dance took up my whole life. And I always wanted to be in the musicals at school, but I never had time. So I never got to experience that. Although with dance, I knew a lot about musicals, and we danced to a lot of, Chicago. And, I knew a lot of it, but I never got to like perform in them until my first musical theater performance was when I was like 19. So then I dived in, and then now I can't get back up. Yeah, I'm in this hole, and I'm very much in it. I love theater so much.
Yeah. What about you, Nick?
I did a theater growing up, like when I was really young, like 8 to 13, and then I took high school off, and then I was technically a theater major in college, but it was mostly just like acting for film, really. So I felt kind of like Gene, where I was like, I was in it, but I was like on the outskirts of it. Like I was with the group, but not like the center of that. So I was like in and out of it.
So film and theater are such different mediums. What do you all love about the two different mediums, since you've all been a part of both worlds?
Oh my gosh. Go ahead.
I mean, yeah, I love the immediacy of theater, and I also love that it is sort of ephemeral in terms of how it works, that it is in the moment and then it's gone. And that I think there's something very special about that, that film lacks, obviously, because film is just sort of permanently, trapped in whatever form it was. But in terms of working in film, I love that there is, I'm a perfectionist. and the very thing that I think is really special about the theater also drove me crazy about the theater. The fact that every single night it could be different, particularly when I was an actor, it drove me up the wall that like I could be better one night than I was the next night. It was something I couldn't control, and I really love in film that I can control that.
Yeah, that's you've created this perfect story that's frozen, and whether we're watching it now or watching it 20 years from now, it's going to be the exact same. So that is what's scary about theater. Nick and Nico, what about the two of you? What do you with the two art forms?
I feel like there's nothing like a live audience, like to perform for people, and like you said, the immediacy of receiving a reaction, is unbeatable. So I do love that about theater, but film, I love how, not that theater isn't collaborative, because it is very much collaborative, but I love the idea of being on film and being able to work with your director right then and there, and then go into shooting with your scene partners, and then, the lighting and all of it has to be all cohesive for it to be working in this moment, and then you can fix it if it's not working. I'm also I love everything about film. Kind of a psycho about it.
I mean, just going off of what everybody said about the live audience, the immediate feedback, it's almost euphoric when you're on stage. And that's originally why I fell in love with acting. But similarly to Jonathan, I feel like, not that I'm a perfectionist, but I'm always stressed that I'm gonna mess it up. So in film, it's like you have that ease of like, even if you do mess it up, you can go again, you can take it from the top, whatever you need. So that's fine. Especially with me, like the rehearsal process, that's what I really struggled with in theater, because rehearsal is necessary, but it just becomes exhausting to a point, and everything is so planned out. Whereas with film, I guess depending on the project, but you can kind of like figure it out as you go, and that's the form of having it be in the moment, where that is with the stage. But yeah, I think the rehearsal process is not my favorite thing in theater.
Funny, because I actually do miss the rehearsal process. I'm kind of the opposite. I think I just like the family structure of it, like the team building of theater, like when you're all, you're working for months on a thing, and you just sort of you build this thing together, and then it's it's gone for good when it's over. I always felt like the end of a show always felt more like death, like it was sadder than the end of a shoot. The end of a film shoot doesn't feel like that for me, because there's so much more work to do after that point.
That's interesting. I always thought the end of the show, it's sad, but it's also like now you have a blank stage to create something else upon. So it was kind of like the most beautiful part, because now you've created something and it's a memory, and now you can go forward and do that. How long did the shoot for Dramarama take? How long were you all working on it?
It was short. It was 16 and a half days of shooting.
Wow.
Well,
obviously you have one major location. So was that a set, or was it an actual house?
It was an actual house.
Okay.
Yeah, it was an actual house, and the people were still living there.
Really?
And they're not.
That's how low budget it was. It was like, we don't have money to put these people in a hotel for 3 weeks. So
I hope that they didn't really have rotary phones still, that those were brought in, that they weren't living
we
back.
found a lot of stuff in their closets that we could use.
Really?
Yeah, it was amazing.
So you all kind of mentioned the thrill of theater, being able to interact with the audience, but because of the pandemic, I don't think you've been able to screen this. with any audiences in person. So what has, I know that you mentioned that there was a drive-in performance, drive-in screening of it. So how has that been, not having that in-person reaction from audiences in the theater?
I mean, for me, it's honestly devastating because, you know, it's a film that has a lot of comedy in it. So I was looking forward to being in a crowded festival theater with people laughing and enjoying that, enjoying to hear when people were going to laugh. And, you know, people also seem to usually get teary at the end. And I was really looking forward to being in an actual audience listening to that. And I think what's sort of extra tragic for indie film is the festival circuit is the only time where you really get to experience that, because, you know, indie films either you don't have a theatrical release, or if you do, it's on maybe 1 or 2 screens, and there's like practically nobody in the theater when you go. Whereas, you know, at the festival stage, you're with literally hundreds of people at the event, and not having that. And especially, you know, I think with the editor and I, like, we crafted this film with the idea of festival audiences watching it, and we would pace out laughs. We'd be like, okay, well, let's give a little more of a beat here so that people can finish laughing before this next line comes in. And, you know, obviously none of that is relevant now.
Hopefully, once this is all over, it can be screened and you will have that experience. I mean, my husband and I watched this together, and we said it was one of the best indie films we've seen in a long time, and certainly one of the best queer indie films that we've seen. We both grew up in the 90s as well, and so we lived through a lot of really terrible movies in the late 90s, early 2000s, where they were just churning stuff out, and it was like, okay, well, I guess we'll go see this. But this was really, like you said, there was a lot of humor, there was a lot of heart, and it was honestly just a joy to watch.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad that it was created. That you all came together and did it was absolutely wonderful. So Nick and Nico, you were not high school students in the 90s. So we hate you for that, but that's okay. How do you think that the characters that you played, like, could this story be translated to 2020? I mean, back then there was no social media, there were no cell phones. And so how do you think that that impacted the story and the relationships between these kids?
Yeah, we spoke about this recently, and it's a really great point, because to be honest, I didn't think about it this way, but I think with the lack of social media and the lack of all of these fixes that we have nowadays that are so easily accessible on our phones and whatnot, the idea of like having a murder mystery party and running around and tackling each other and just things that are so physical and so in the moment and so not on a small screen, I don't think kids play like that anymore. And I say play, but like, I don't think that's how the hangouts are these days, or the sleepovers. And in this way, I think it would have made way more sense. I mean, for it to be set in the 90s, because it's so real then, and nowadays I don't think that's just reality, which is a bummer, because that's such a beautiful way to live, you know?
And also like you said at the end too, when everyone's saying goodbye, I mean, you couldn't just text someone, you couldn't just message them, so it was really find a phone, hope that they're home, or write them an actual letter.
The stakes are really higher.
Yeah, really high. It's like you really, I graduated in 97. I'm close friends with one person from high school. And I'd say there are like 2 other people that I talk to once in a while. And that's it, because you just drift apart. So Nick, what do you think about?
Yeah, I think, well, I agree with all of that, where, yeah, the playing, I think, can be lost. And even if there's a friend group that does that, I think, like, sociopolitically, we're so polarized now that we have this group of friends in Dramarama who don't all align politically in their views. And I don't think that would be as common today. I mean, you know, I'm sure we all distance ourselves from people who have different ideologies from us to an extent, at least. And so we're definitely not doing sleepovers and murder mystery pizza hangouts with those people. So I think that is something also very specific that maybe wouldn't have been made as much sense to have it set in 2020. But I think it is important to showcase that you also can have those sort of disagreements and be okay, but
Right.
very much 90s, yeah.
So we have a question that just popped into the chat. So Jonathan, who are directors that influence you?
Gosh, that's such a hard question. I I tend to write a lot of ensemble films or films that have more than one protagonist, and I definitely think that that is from my obsession with Robert Altman and P.T. Anderson, and filmmakers who really showcased and embraced the idea of an ensemble. And it's just sort of how my brain works. It's difficult for me to write a single protagonist film, actually. So yeah, I would say those. I don't know. I mean, it's funny. It's funny because it's hard. It's also hard for me to step back and sort of look at my own work and wonder what people think it looks like and feels like, separate from who I admire, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So I've only directed on stage, but I was watching this and I knew we were going to talk. And there was something that you did directorially that I found very interesting, and I wanted to know why you made that choice. We never actually see the faces of any of the adults that are connected to the kids. The only time that we ever see anyone else's faces is at the airport, but it's all extras. So why was that your choice?
Yeah, there was actually an earlier version of the script had the parents in them with, on camera. And I took it out because I really wanted the story to feel like you were inside of the bubble of these kids and their high stakes about their last night together and having to separate and all their emotions that are around that. And I felt like including adults fully in that sort of broke the spell in a way of that sort of magical vibe that they were trying to hold on to. And that also I sort of hoped that we could see teenagehood a little bit more from their perspective rather than having an adult be there to be our eyes into that world.
Yeah. There were so many. What I really appreciated about the film was attention to detail. And Nick, I don't know if it was a choice of yours or the costume designer, but when you first show up and you had the dish towel as the cravat, I was like, that is exactly what some kid who did not plan out his costume would do. So was that planned? Was that you?
That was not me. I think that happened in discussion between Devin, our costume designer, and Jonathan. But
it was actually in the original script.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. Now I look bad. Did I read the script? No, but I mean, I've done that before in my real life where I've like worn a white shirt and like just drawn something on it, and that was my costume. I did that 2 years ago for Halloween, but so I've done that in real life.
You were the theater kid that the rest of us were like, oh, can you just put like 10 minutes of effort in?
I was literally Gene, yeah.
So what for the two of you, for Nick and Nico, what connected the two of you to Gene and to Oscar? What were what did you find within them that was in you and vice versa?
Oscar's dreams, of course, of moving to LA and be an actor and think that, once you get to LA, it's all going to happen for you. I can definitely relate to the dream of wanting to be a film actor and wanting it so bad, to the point, not that I did this, but to the point of like lying to everybody because he believed in it so much, and then it didn't quite happen. So, or the way he thought it was, but also the magnetic like personality of Oscar, where he doesn't want any of his friends to have this lull moment. Anytime it goes dark, I think Oscar's like, okay, we got to figure out something to lighten up the mood, and like, let's just move on. And I can appreciate that, because I think in my friend group, I do try to keep it as light as possible. But I love Oscar, and I love everything that he stands for, and his innocence, and wanting to kind of stay in this world that's safe. You know, he's scared about the unknown in the real world, and he wants to stay in this like little bubble with his friends because it's safe and he feels, you know, comfortable. And I can understand that to an extent.
Yeah. Nick, what about you?
Yeah, I think well, on the surface level, I think just growing up gay, but our environments were so different, and I think actually it was that which made me so interested in it, because he grew up in conservative Escondido, and I grew up in East Bay Area in the 2000s. So it was like just very different experiences. But still, you experience some sort of internal struggle when you're trying to find yourself that I think is universal, especially growing up and right before, during, or after college. And I think that's what I really latched on to, was he's trying to protect himself and find himself, but through that, the people around him who think they know him feel like they're losing him. And he is, even though he's surrounded by people who love and support him, he can still feel lonely. He can still feel like the odd man out, the black sheep, which I think is, like I said, universal. And so that I really latched on to and wanted to play that.
What about, because you mentioned that you're gay, so what about your coming out story? Did you struggle like that Gene did, or?
No, well, mine was, I mean, I don't know. I consider it very lucky, and I talked to Jonathan about this, where it's just so different. I didn't even really ever have that moment of, it just was like I just lived my life, which I know is like a very privileged thing to say, and I'm very grateful for that. But it was so different, and a lot of my friends, both growing up and to this day, were also gay. So it was just extremely different.
Do you think that the times had something to do with it? I mean, the mid 90s was really just like, most people in the country knew about AIDS because of the gay population and vice versa. So, I mean, movie based in 1994, I mean, we're just coming into the time of antiviral drugs and all of those things. So do you think that it's part of what you were saying? Is it just easier now than it was in the 90s?
I think it's both, you know, the time and also geography where you're located. I'm sure there's places, like we've discussed also the cast and the director previously, where there are places in the South and the Midwest where today it is maybe even scarier than somewhere in California in the 90s. So I think it's a mix of both. I think there is this greater understanding and acceptance generationally with millennials and Gen Z, just honestly through maybe the good thing of social media, like the one good side. You know, we're more open, we see more of that, and you can't be as afraid of what you do see. But yeah, I think it's both.
Yeah, and the world is, you know, like Nico was saying, the movie, there's such a close-knit group of friends, but now your friends can be global. There are people you can connect with. So, you know, and Jonathan, this is a question for you, actually. I remember going through that time every year where it was like another graduating class would happen and people would leave and you didn't know who you'd be able to stay in touch with. So why did you want to base this movie on the eve of when Rose goes to New York City? First of all, I was like, if you have an early flight to New York from California, you should not be having a sleepover. But that aside, so why was it important to make sure that it was like the night of her impending leaving?
Yeah, again, just based off of my own experiences, my friend group was so tight and I was so emotionally invested in them that once everyone started leaving for college, like I felt so unmoored and lost and upset, even though I was also going away to college. And I guess like the stakes of that and the uncertainty around that and the mixed feelings that came around that in terms of the separation, anxiety, and the different ways that manifested, sometimes not so great in terms of, feeling like you're losing somebody. And so you lash out at them instead of cherishing that moment. I definitely felt like those feelings were important to sort of put into this final party between everyone before they actually started separating, which again, is sort of is my own experience with my friends, because I know a lot of people my age who don't know anyone from high school, that never really connected with anyone from high school or stayed connected to them because it was just hellish from beginning to end, and they never wanted to think about those people ever again.
Yeah, there are definitely people that we all have like that you just want to completely put a wall up to. And then there are people, and I almost feel that with this friend group, they're the kind of friends that could pick up 5 years later and it was like nothing would change, and I think that was that's where the warmth of the movie came from, was that even if they were having these issues, you could tell that there was that deep caring. And just, I really appreciated the fact at the end when you have the scene with Gene and Allie where understand what's going on. She understands what's going on. He understands what's going on, but it's just one of those things that remains unsaid. I thought it was really powerful. I'm just going to keep gushing about this movie because I really enjoyed it. Hold on, we have another question. So what are the plans for the film? Will it be released at some point?
Yes, it will be released at some point. I don't know what the exact plan is yet. We've been talking to distributors for the last month, and that will probably continue through the fall, but hopefully by the end of the fall, we'll have a plan for 2021, but it will definitely have a proper release next year of some sort. Who that is and what format that will be is to be determined.
Yeah, we'll all have plans for 2021 at some point. I have kind of a personal follow-up for that. Do you think this could ever be adapted into a stage play?
Oh gosh, what a great question.
I mean, because it's essentially one setting.
Yeah.
So would it work on stage?
I love that idea. I think.
Okay, well, we can talk offline about that.
Okay. So. I'm all for that. It's funny because the other question that I get sometimes is, will there be a sequel? Yeah. That people want to see where these characters sort of end up 5-10 years from when they separated from one another.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately that's up to you, but there are some times where movies do that, and then I think it just takes away from the purity that you just want to remember them as is, which is all of us have memories of our childhood, and sometimes those memories just end, and sometimes people come in and out of our lives for a reason. So, but if it is adapted for the stage, Nico, we'll talk about making it a musical. So.
Oscar would love a solo.
Yeah. Absolutely. It would be like this grand song as Sherlock Holmes running around the house trying to solve the crime. Well,
Rose would probably upstage Oscar's solo.
Oh yeah, she would come in. And
Wow, 100%.
It'd be a big tap number somehow, but I don't know how that would be.
we'll make it work.
Well, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to
Thank
talk
you so
about
much,
this
Paul.
really wonderful movie. I hope that everyone for all of the screenings across the country have enjoyed it as much as I did. I hope anyone watching this without on film either already watched it or can watch it in the next couple days, because it really is a truly wonderful movie. So thanks so much, and stay healthy and safe, both mentally and physically. And hopefully we're going to see this in the theaters someday soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And thanks to Out on Film.